and welcome to the Kink Perspective. My name is Chris. I'm a psychotherapist and consultant. On today's show, guys, we're going to step into something that lives right beneath every story I've ever told so far: the body. I'm going to go back today to some of my roots, specifically in what I do as being trauma specific in my practice. And this question came to me from actually some people that I work with, but this question directly came to me from some new listeners out of Argentina, actually, that are dealing with their own complications and asked me how this might play over inside of the lifestyle. So, for many, many people, the body isn't just a neutral place. It's where pain lives. It's where memory hides. It's also where we first learned what safety or danger felt like, long before we could name even either one or what they were. The body remembers what the mind forgets, and when that memory gets too heavy, it turns against itself. That's what today's show is all about. What happens when the body betrays, when it takes over, and when it finally starts to tell the truth. Now, before I get into all of this today, I want to take a moment, as I always do, and thank all of you who have been tuning in, sharing how much these conversations mean with you, sharing them with some people that you feel need to hear them. So whether you've been listening from the start or you just found the show today, your messages, your comments, and questions, that's what's keeping this space alive. They remind me of what we're doing here, talking honestly about kink and intimacy, emotions, and power. It's about something much bigger than just sex. It's about learning how to live in your body again, without fear or apology. So if you're listening on Spotify, take a moment and rate the show 5 stars. This will allow other people to find it, keeps these conversations alive. It helps more people find these kind of discussions they need to hear to help themselves, right? If you follow me on YouTube, Apple, wherever, right? Just rate the show, like, subscribe. It keeps it growing. If you'd like to support the podcast directly, there is a donation link in the show's description. I've also put now an external link because I know on other platforms, the word link, it's not hyperlinked. Every little bit helps me keep producing this work and keep these conversations going. All right. Now, today's episode is going to tie together 3 different ideas. First, betrayal. Second, command. And finally, the truth. We're going to start with how trauma teaches the body to disconnect, to go numb, to protect, and to survive at any cost. And then we're going to move into what happens when the body starts speaking again, through desire or impulse, even compulsion. And finally, we're going to look at how kink and the embodiment can help the body guide instead of be just in a perpetual state of battle, right? Because at the heart of this is one truth. You can't heal what you keep separate, right? Whether through trauma or pleasure or play, the body is always telling you a story. The question is whether you're ready to listen and hear it. So let's begin with what that means when the body betrays. This part, I'm going to kind of focus a little bit on some things that I normally talk about. So this is going to be a little bit more, not so much clinical today, but I want you all to start to understand, especially those listening that have experienced different things in your life, pains, maybe car accidents, assaults, whatever the case may be. When I was young, I remember coming home from high school, and I came home to a robbery taking place. My house was being burglarized, and I was assaulted in my home. And I remember what that did to me and how my body reacts now whenever I come home all of these years later, some 30 plus years later, right? All of these things create different forms of trauma for all of us, right? And there is no trauma Olympics. No one person's trauma is worse or, deserves more attention than the other, because they all affect us differently. And that's what matters. We need to understand these things. Now, when the body betrays you, it doesn't announce it. It's not some big flashing neon sign. It doesn't turn on you in some sort of dramatic way. It just stops feeling safe to live in. It freezes, it numbs out, it goes quiet. Now, for some, it feels like a fog. For other people, it's like a tightness that never really ever leaves. It's the sense that your body is something, inside of you, there's something going on, there's something happening to you, not something living inside of you. Now, that's the real quiet reality of trauma. It teaches the body that being alive equates to danger. When something painful or violating happens, the mind's job is to attempt to make sense of it, but the body's job is to survive it. So the body learns to shut down sensations that feel overwhelming, and it starts trimming away what hurts: desire, vulnerability, hunger, emotion, until safety and numbness become the same thing. What's really interesting about this is I was working with somebody this week, and we were discussing this, that the same fear kept coming back, that what if something happens? What if nothing, all these different things are going to keep happening to me? And then, as I reiterated to them, in 3 years, that's been proven that nothing is going to happen. The shoe's not going to drop. Now, the mind is aware, but the body isn't, right? And that's kind of what led a lot to this today, and the question I got out of Argentina. This is why so many trauma survivors say, I feel disconnected from my body. It's not metaphorical. The nervous system literally pulls the plug on full sensory experience. The body stops sending certain signals to the brain because it feels too much at once. It's trying to understand what is actually safe or what's being made unsafe. The mind might want to move forward, but the body's still back in that moment, waiting for the danger to pass. Now, here's where the shame comes in. When you live with that kind of disconnect for long enough, you start judging the body for doing its job. You think, why can't I feel pleasure like I used to? Why does touch feel wrong? Why do I freeze when someone cares for me? Now, you might assume it's weakness, but really it's all about protection. The body remembers even when the mind refuses to. And in my work, and especially in conversations within the lifestyle community, this is where the line between betrayal and survival starts to blur. Now, many people come into kink carrying histories of control or neglect, even violation, right? For them, the body isn't just the site of pleasure, it's the archive of everything that's ever gone wrong. And yet, kink becomes the place where they start renegotiating that relationship. Now, let's take submission, for example. On the surface, it looks like giving up control, but for someone who's lived their whole life feeling powerless, choosing to surrender can be a reclamation of agency. They're deciding when, how, and whom they're going to yield to. Now, what once felt forced becomes voluntary. What was once danger becomes chosen vulnerability. Now, that choice rewrites the nervous system's script. It says, this time I'm in control of my lack of control. Now, the same can be true for dominance. For someone who's spent years being silenced or unseen, taking command can be its own kind of healing. Now, it's not about ego or control just for control's sake. It's about learning that authority and care can exist in the same space. It's about proving to yourself that power doesn't always have to harm. Both sides of that exchange, the giving and the holding, are ways the body starts to learn to trusting it. Now, kink at its healthiest becomes a laboratory for your nervous system repair. You create structured moments of intensity and choice. You enter them fully. You exit them safely. Now, over time, the body starts to believe that it can feel deeply without being destroyed by it. That's why it's so important to understand the psychology behind what's happening. Now, here, trauma disconnects the body and the mind. Kink, when done with awareness and consent, can reconnect things. Now, I want to be very clear on this with what I'm about to go into. I am not saying, and there is So many claims by so many people. There are people in New York doing it that are legally doing it. And I'm going to keep calling it out. BDSM does not heal trauma. Nothing heals trauma, right? Anybody pushing that, these sex coaches, lifestyle coaches, life coaches in general, right? You should not be talking to someone who says we can cure you of trauma through especially through BDSM, right? That is going to, again, I'm making this very well known because so many people keep pushing the notion that BDSM can cure trauma. And not just trauma. I've heard one Dom say that he could cure OCD and neurodivergent. You can't cure these. You just can't. And it gives me a headache. And I ramble on about this stuff, but just want to make sure we completely understand that, right? All right. Now, the sensations, whether through touch, pain, or restraint, can pull a person back into the present moment. The brain stops running from the past long enough to realize, hey, I'm here, I'm going through this, and I'm still safe. But here's the thing. That process can also backfire if it's rushed or not held very well. The body can tell the difference between chosen intensity and unprocessed danger, unless there's trust and containment. This is why negotiation, aftercare, planning, all of these things matter so much. So they're not just protocols, they're psychological safety nets. They let the body know it can come back to calm, it can recenter itself. Now, for some, though, the betrayal runs very deep. They've spent a long time managing or ignoring their body that, the idea of feeling this again is very terrifying. So when arousal or emotion does surface, it feels like losing control. The heart races, the breath shortens, and even pleasure feels suspicious. That's the residual nature of betrayal. The body's language getting mistaken for a threat. Now, I've had somebody once tell me, I don't trust my body because it wanted to do things I wasn't supposed to want. Now, that right there is the collision between trauma and conditioning. The body keeps its own truths even when the mind has learned to deny them. Desire doesn't check for permission, it just arrives. And when you've been taught that desire is dangerous, the body becomes the enemy. Now, Kink can start to rewrite that story, but it takes time. And because what's really happening under the surface is the nervous system learning to tolerate being alive again. Now, that's not just erotic, it's existential. Feeling is risky when you spent years surviving by not feeling. Every shiver, every tremor, every moment of release is the body saying, I'm still here. Now, it's easy to talk about reclaiming the body as if it's empowering, but truthfully, it's really messy. And it can bring up grief, anger, or even disgust. And when sensation returns, so does the memories that are tied to it. That's why embodiment work, whether through kink or therapy, needs pacing. You can't force safety into a body that doesn't believe in it yet. You have to earn it. Movement or moment by moment, movement by movement. And this is where the idea of betrayal begins to shift. The body wasn't betraying you, it was protecting you. It just never got the memo that the danger has passed. Every freeze, every numb patch, every impulse to leave your body, that's survival logic. Outdated, but necessary. So maybe the work isn't to forgive the body for betraying you. Maybe it's to thank it for keeping you alive. And then gently teach it that it doesn't have to do that job anymore. The body remembers even when the mind refuses to, but remembering isn't the same thing as reliving. Remembering is how you integrate. It's how you start to make sense of your own history through sensation instead of avoidance. And in kink, that process happens through structure. There's intention and negotiation, ritual, compromise, ongoing conversations. The body learns that intensity can exist inside of safety, and that's the shift. From betrayal to trust, from silence to language. Because when the body begins to trust again, everything else follows. Connections deepen, pleasure expands, control starts to feel optional instead of necessary. And that's where I'm going to go next, to what happens when the body starts speaking again, when numbness gives way to craving, and when silence turns to impulse, and when the very thing that once felt dangerous begins to command your attention. So this next part is what I'm going to talk about, when the body commands. When the body starts speaking again, it doesn't whisper, it floods. After years of silence, numbness, and control, the first signs of being alive can almost feel violent. Desire, anger, craving, they don't ease their way back in. They hit like waves. For some people, it feels like freedom. For others, it feels like losing control all over again. This is what I call, the body's return. It's the moment when the nervous system, after being locked down for so long, starts to thaw. The freeze begins to melt here, and all that energy that was trapped inside starts to move. But because the system isn't used to it, that movement doesn't always feel safe. Pleasure can feel like danger. Excitement feels like a threat. The same body that once shut down to survive is now overflowing, and it doesn't know how to pace itself. That's what makes this stage so confusing. People often think healing means feeling good again, but the truth is healing usually starts by feeling everything again. The good, the bad, the forgotten, the forbidden. The body doesn't filter, it just releases. This is why desire can feel so unpredictable during heavy trauma recovery. You can crave something that terrifies you. You can get turned on by dynamics that echo old pain. You can find yourself drawn to intensity because it feels familiar, even if it hurts. And I know right now there's going to be somebody out there specifically in a part of the world that needs to hear that, right? It's not self-sabotage. It's the nervous system trying to make sense of what once had no logic, right? And in the kink world, this shows up all the time and often gets misunderstood. When someone is aroused by power exchange or impact or restraint, people outside that world assume they're reenacting their trauma. But inside of kink, it's not about reliving the pain. It's about reframing it. It's the difference between being overpowered and choosing surrender. The same physical sensations can carry completely different meanings depending on who's in control. And that's the paradox of the body when it starts to command again. Once that hurt, what once really hurt you, can become what heals you, but only through choice and consent. Now, the body isn't always wrong in what it wants. It's just speaking an old language that needs translation. Think of it this way. For someone who's spent years disconnected, intensity is one of the first things that cuts through the fog, right? You feel a sting, a pull, a rush, and suddenly you're present. The mind goes quiet for a little bit because the body is finally louder. That's why some survivors are drawn to impact play or pain, power dynamics, or restraint. It's not about punishment. It's about the contact. It's the body saying, I exist again. But there's a line between listening to the body and being ruled by it. When the flood of sensations return, the first instinct is often to chase it, to feel more, to go deeper, to push limits. That's the pendulum swing from numbness to compulsion. The same way someone might overheat after starving, the body tries to gauge, or tries to gorge itself on feeling. It's trying to make up for lost time. This is where impulse starts to blur with healing. You might find yourself acting on urges that don't really make sense, maybe getting pulled toward people or situations that mirror old wounds. Now, that's not random. It's the nervous system revisiting unfinished business, right? The problem isn't that impulses just show up. It's that without awareness, they can pull you back into reenactment instead of resolution. And I've had people tell me things like, I don't know why I keep going back to that dynamic. It's not good for me, but I feel alive inside of it. Now, that's the body commanding. It's chasing the rush of recognition, not realizing it's running on an old script. The same chemistry that once signaled danger now feels like desire. And that's what trauma really does. It wires survival the whole circuitry of arousal, and it kind of just lumps a lot of things together, right? But there's another side to this. The return of sensation also opens the door to pleasure, a deep pleasure, the kind that isn't just sexual, but existential. When you can stay in your body long enough to let pleasure exist without shame, the same energy that once fueled panic begins to fuel connection. The body starts to trust that it can feel without breaking. Now, in kink, this process can be really profound and deep. Now, a submissive who used to disassociate during pain learns to breathe through it, to stay present. A dominant who once used control to protect themselves learns to soften into care. Each scene becomes a conversation between body and mind, between the impulse and the intention, and that's embodiment. And the psychology behind this is really simple but hard to live. The nervous system doesn't distinguish between fear and excitement at first. Both states active, or activate similar physical responses. They elevate your heart rate, shallow breath, adrenaline spikes, body temperature rises. The difference lies in the context. In fear, you feel trapped. In excitement, you feel choice. That's why the same sensations that once meant a threat can, in the right conditions, mean freedom. And that's the key, is context. When you have choice, what was once chaos becomes communication. The body stops commanding in panic and starts expressing in clarity. You learn to recognize what's a flashback and what's a desire, what's a reflex and what's truth. But that takes practice. You don't learn that overnight. Listening to the body doesn't mean obeying it blindly. It means decoding it. It means asking, what are you trying to tell me before you act? Because sometimes the body isn't saying yes, it's saying, remember? The work here isn't to learn discernment. It's to hold sensation without curiosity of judgment or urgency. That's what containment really means. You don't suppress what's rising, but you don't let it take the wheel either, right? You learn to breathe through the flood and let it pass through you rather than become you. When you can do that, the body stops being a threat. It becomes a teacher. The same impulses that once pulled you into chaos start pointing you towards what needs attention. Craving becomes information, desire becomes dialogue. This is where kink, once again, can mirror the healing process. The scene becomes a microcosm for this work. In intensity, containment, consent, aftercare, the body leads, the mind translates, and trust ties it all together. You enter the unknown, you feel fully, and then you return to safety. That cycle teaches your body what safety actually feels like. Not just what it knows, but what it feels. So when the body commands, the goal isn't to silence it or to surrender to it. It's to listen to it, to recognize that every impulse has a history and every craving is a clue. The body isn't asking you to lose control. It's asking you to learn it again in a new way. And that's how the flood turns into a flow. The same energy that once carried danger begins to carry truth. And that's where we're going to go next. To what it means when the body starts to speak, not as an enemy or as a captor, but as an oracle. And not oracle in the sense, like I'm prophetizing here, but where we're hearing something and we're listening. Now, when the body starts speaking again, it doesn't sound like it used to. It's quieter, it's steadier, it's less desperate. It stops shouting through the pain or cravings or whatever else. It starts communicating through sensation, instinct, and presence. This is the stage where the body stops being the enemy and becomes the oracle, the truth teller that's been waiting for you to listen. When you've lived for years in survival mode, the body signals get distorted. You learn to tune them out because they once meant danger or need. But once you start listening again, you realize that the body was never trying to destroy you. It was trying to guide you. The tremors before the tears, the warmth that rises when you're safe, the tightening that tells you something isn't right, that's language. The body doesn't speak in words, it speaks in weather. It tells you what's shifting inside of you before your mind can catch up. That's what embodiment really is. It's not about constant awareness or forcing yourself to be in your body all the time. It's about forming a relationship with it again. It's the act of checking in, noticing, responding. It's grounding when you drift, breathing when you brace, and pausing when you push yourself too hard. Small practices done constantly teach the body that it doesn't have to scream to be heard. In this phase, people often find that their sense of self feels more anchored. They can feel their boundaries physically instead of just conceptually. They notice tension when a line's been crossed, ease when they're in alignment, or expansion when something's right? We understand this in psychology as the body's awareness of its own internal state. When trauma has been present, that awareness dulls. When embodiment returns, it begins to sharpen its senses again. This is where play and sensuality start to feel safe again, not because you've healed, but because you stay present enough through the feeling. Pardon me. Now, touch no longer overwhelms, it informs. Pleasure doesn't feel dangerous, it feels earned. You're not escaping through sensation anymore, you're inhabiting it. In kink, this shows up in structure around play, negotiating aftercare, rituals. They all modeled containment. They show up in what looks like to move through intensity and come back to calm together. That cycle, tension, peak, release, repair, mirrors the nervous system's natural rhythm. It's not therapy, but it echoes the same principles, right? This is not some model, some therapeutic model that we're trying to do here. It's just letting your body know it can feel safe inside of the intensity. Aftercare in particular is one of the most overlooked parts of embodiment. Now, I want to be clear as I go into this, and I do this all the time. Pardon me, still getting over my cold, guys. That some people don't want aftercare. Some people don't do aftercare. Now, neither one is wrong, right? If you negotiate it, great. It has benefits. I'm not saying it doesn't. I'm not saying I haven't done it, but there are people who don't want it. I've covered this before. I always say this every time I mention aftercares. I want people to know it's not something that's steadfast and needs to be done, because there are plenty of people who either don't want to, don't know how to, don't care to, don't want it, or don't want to lose the sensation of what they've just done, right? That's my disclaimer for this. So what do I mean here when I say that aftercare can be overlooked? Now, it's not just the emotional check-ins or physical comfort of aftercare. It's the moment where both people acknowledge what just happened. They regulate together. They bring the body back to neutral. The act of returning safely again and again. And this teaches the nervous system that it can handle connection without collapse. And that's what integration really means. Not never being triggered, but not never feeling fear or hunger again, but knowing to come back from it. It's the rhythm of return. You start to realize that betrayal and command weren't opposites, that they were just different forms of the body trying to protect you. The freeze and the flood were both about survival. Now, the body doesn't need either of them. It can feel, it can respond, and it can rest. And there's a line I often think about here. The body stops being a battlefield when we stop trying to silence it. Because that's the real shift. The work isn't about mastering the body or fixing it or purging it of its impulses. It's about learning to stay in a conversation with it. Every signal is data. Every ache, every pull, every hesitation is the body's way of trying to tell you the truth. When you start responding instead of reacting, the dynamic changes completely. You move from control to collaboration. The body stops being something you manage and becomes something you live with. You start noticing how much of your life was spent negotiating with yourself instead of listening. And that's why embodiment doesn't happen in a single moment. It happens through repetition, grounding, breath, play, reflection, repair. You keep showing up for the conversation even when it's uncomfortable. You keep learning when to act, when to rest, when to let sensation pass through without needing to turn into a full story. And that's what brings us back to the lifestyle, because this is where kink and embodiment overlap most clearly. The scenes, the rituals, the trust, the communication, they're not therapeutic replacements, but they are living examples of what it means to move through power, intensity, and care while staying present. Now, kink becomes a language for what it means to inhabit the body with that awareness. The practice isn't in the act itself, it's in the reflection that follows. It's in how partners talk afterward, how they read each other's signals, how they pace, how they adapt. Those small acts of attunement are the heart of embodiment. They remind the body that that power and safety can coexist, that surrender and agency can live side by side. And that's where all of this ties together: trauma and desire and embodiment and play. When the body begins to speak, you stop needing to dominate or deny it. You start to trust that it knows what it's doing. You start to let it guide you, right, toward what's real. The irony is that your body never stopped talking. It was always sending you signals. It just had to speak louder than your defenses. Every ache, every numb patch, every spark of arousal was an attempt to bring you home. The betrayal, the command, and the speech, they're not separate events. They're the story of learning to live in your own skin again. And when that happens, something shifts in how you move through the world. You stop needing to prove that you're in control. You stop fearing what you feel. You start moving from a place of presence instead of protection. That's not perfection, that's embodiment. Because the truth is, the body doesn't want to be mastered. It wants to be met. It wants you to listen when it says no, to breathe when it says yes, and to rest when it's done. It wants you to trust that it remembers how to return to safety if you let it. That's the final arc here. Not the body as a battlefield, not as a captor, but as a compass. It may not always lead you where you expect, but it will always lead you back to yourself. As we close down this episode today, I want to leave you with a thought. The relationship you have with your body isn't a problem to solve. It's a rhythm to live with. There will always be days when it feels like a friend and days when it feels like a stranger. That's not regression. That's the ebb and flow of embodiment. The goal isn't to stay perfectly present all the time. It's to recognize when you've drifted and find your way back. The body is always speaking, but its language is subtle. It shows up as restlessness, as warmth, tension, fatigue. It tells you when something's right and when something's too much and when it's time to pause. Learning to listen to that without judgment is what changes everything. Because when you stop trying to dominate your body, you start collaborating with it. You realize it was never against you. It's always trying to protect you, even when it overdid it. That's why betrayal and command and truth aren't stages to fix or move past. They're patterns you're going to move through again and again. And sometimes you're going to disconnect. Sometimes you're going to overflow. The difference now is that you know how to come back. You know what safety feels like. You know how the body, you know what the same body that once shut down is also capable of trusting again. So I want to leave you all with a question, as I always do every week. And I want you to take a moment and ask yourself this. What part of your body still doesn't trust you to listen? Not control it, not silence it, just to listen. That question alone can change the way you live inside of yourself. So if there's anything from today's conversation you want me to unpack a little bit more, or a topic you want me to explore in a future show, send it in. That's why I brought this today up. Come back to a little bit of my wheelhouse of what I know, right? And I understand. I read them all. I read your questions, your comments, your emails, And many of them are, part of these powerful episodes over these last 4 years have all started with your questions. That's where the show's been all about, right? Down. Again, real quickly, I would say I'm about 95, 97%, not 100% yet. I'm getting there. Please, again, thank you for all of your well wishes. I appreciate it truly. You don't have to tell me, and let me explain again why. When you do, I want you to know I read your words and I'm going to respond. But like last week alone, I responded to just about 300 comments and emails. Thank you. It's more for me to do, so it's not that I don't appreciate it. I appreciate it. Silent wishes are great, and that's all I want. So thank you. I really, really do. And I've read all of your kind words. I'm getting there. Just a nasty thing that I'm trying to get over, but I'm getting there. Now, this week, I don't have that many comments that were against me. But the old guy from the sea, I don't know. This is where we're going to start with your famous now. The old guy from the sea decided to send me a message to telling me how much my analysis was off about some of the things I've written about lately. That this past week that I've led people astray with psychological foray, and I'm just dangling. What did he say? Let me pull up his words here real quick. I have wrapped up some dog shit in tinfoil and tried to sell it to you all as earrings. Actually, that's not what I'm doing. Analysis is different for how we all come up with theory, right? Of what's happening to somebody. And then we confirm it by speaking with somebody. So generally, when I'm writing about something, I'm usually taking an experience and I'm writing about that. That's not ridiculous. If you don't like what I have to say, stop reading it, right? It's kind of comical. The fact that you Googled everything that I said and you told me that you're somehow, I didn't understand this one. Your degree in finance made you more qualified to speak about somebody's emotions than mine does. Well, I thought about that. And first I thought, well, that's just stupid. But, then I looked at finance, and what's interesting about that is it's about people's impulses, and it's their desires and their hopes and their fears and their dreams, right? But so you don't really care when you lose $50,000 of somebody's money because you already got paid. So if you steer them towards a bad investment, you don't really care, right? You don't care the damage it's done. You don't really explain all the risks to them. You lie to them so you can make money, right? So if anybody's causing more harm around here, it's probably you. I'm not saying finance, you shouldn't invest. That's not what I'm saying to you, to anybody listening. I think you can. I've made investments in the past, but for somebody who doesn't really care, who's openly said that they don't care whether their clients make money or lose money, he gets paid, tells me that they're completely separated from emotion. That's fine. That's you. I'm not. I'm heavily invested and I care about people. And there's a lot of, if people could attest to it, they would hear that. The next one, I really couldn't come up with a better screen name off of this one. But we're going to take G.I. Jane. And it's not so much I'm calling her that because of the movie or that they're military. It was more the very harsh manner approach that they came at me with. Maybe it was part of the way they looked. I don't really know. But it was part of their name and part of a couple of things, how I create people's faux screen names because, calling them out. Jane, however, had a problem because she felt that if I'm calling out a submissive behavior, I'm not calling out dominance behavior. Well, if anybody knows me, I tend not to really call out dominance all the time because they get called out enough, right? I've been a part of an order for, I don't know, a very long time now, more than 12 or 13 years. It's high protocol, but in all of that time with all these people who have collectively between them probably near 500 years of experience, because there's a lot of people in my order, and they all have a very, some of them 20, 30 years inside of the lifestyle. None of them have had any consent violations. None of them have had problems. None of them have had anything done to them. There's nothing, I'm not saying that other people haven't, but, I don't tend to beat up on dominance because I don't see what everybody else sees. I'm not all over the world. I'm not in Belgium, England, all over the US, Canada, Mexico, Australia, wherever these places are, they're happening, right? Even South Korea, of all places, right? I'm not saying incidents don't happen. But if we were going to balance the scales, you can't just say dominants are the consistent problem. Submissives are a problem too. Women are a problem too. If you don't like that I called that out because you think, what I didn't understand is you were saying, you first called me sexist. Well, dominants can be, submissives can be male or female or not, right? So that's not sexist. And then second, I'm not a misogynist because I don't hate women. That's just the most absurdly stupid comment I've ever made in my life. I love the female form. Holy God, there's nothing better. But my proclivities I'm not going to go into because it doesn't really matter. But to make, this is the problem, I think, with discourse today. See, you disagree with something and then you go on the attack, and all you force me to do is to get on the defensive. Well, I'm not going to give you that. What I am going to tell you is you made really absurd and asinine comments about me and you don't even know me. And then you threw in some isms or phobias or whatever. And then you somehow think, why didn't you just call me Hitler and get it over with? I mean, just throw it all in there, right? I mean, quite honestly, I get it. I mean, I went and looked through your social media, so I do understand who you are. I'm more curious now that stuff like that's going on in the Middle East with the peace deal, who are you going to protest against next, right? If you want to start throwing stones in the glass house. Anyway, I'm none of those things just because you want me to attack a side are ever going to happen. I don't acquiesce to that. You could have emailed me and just asked me, what do I feel about dominance? And I'm going to tell you there are some bad dominants out there. But I equally think there are bad submissives. I equally think that there's more so the bigger overarching problem inside of the lifestyle is that people don't commit to learning. Nobody wants to spend their time. I've been doing this for 27 years now. I still go to classes. I still go to events. I still want to learn. Why? Because I love the lifestyle. And people don't want to do that. You want to go out, spank each other, throw a collar on when you don't even really understand the significance of it, and then go home 5 minutes later and have sex. Now, that's fine, but that's not BDSM. And I'll argue that point all day because BDSM and sex are not synonymous. That's kinky sex. That's fine. Nothing wrong with that. If you want to do that, go ahead. But don't put yourself in my category because you're not. I'm doing scenes. We do big scenes that take a lot of prep and a lot of time. They take a lot of training. I have a mentor. I know mentors are getting harder to find. Why? Because no one wants to teach the majority of the people that are out there because they're not serious they don't want to commit. They don't want the commitment, right? So that doesn't make me a misogynist. It doesn't make me sexist. It doesn't make me anything. It makes me opinionated and highly well informed. And I hold 2 master's degrees. I've got 3 bachelor's degrees. I'm pretty well educated. Been around the world. Anyway, I'm not going to detract my show for you, Jane. But since you listen and you were hoping I would respond to you, you got your wish. I responded to you. But I can still tell you you're wrong. If you can't equate that sounds like a personal problem. And I think you should go talk to somebody about that. Or I can make you some great recommendations of some maybe social workers to go and talk to because I don't really help with that. I don't help with delusion. Right? Anyway, I know this show was a lot. I know it was back into my trauma wheelhouse, which I really enjoyed getting back into with this question. So Buenos Aires, I want you to know I heard you. I appreciate you. I thank you for the question. It really gave me something to think about this past weekend. That's why I was kind of a little bit quiet. I was just sitting around with this thought when you sent it to me. And I do hope you find your path to healing, right? And you're more than welcome to email me, and I'm more than welcome to help try to find somebody there to work with if you need to. I will absolutely help you. So keep your questions coming in. Keep this conversation alive. Think about what I asked you, right? What part of your body still doesn't trust you to listen? It's a powerful question, right? It's not a therapy question. It's a real question you can sit with and ask yourself when you're in the lifestyle and what you're doing and what you're not paying attention to. Hell, what you're missing out on. So, comments, social media connections, you know the drill. Until next time, everybody, be safe, stay kinky.